You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, I'm giving you the Detroit sports truth with your host, Taylor the Gator Phillips. I lay down the entire truth about all things Detroit sports. If you want to know the Detroit sports truth and chime in on it, the number to call or text message live on the DST podcast on Spreaker is 231-429-3668. Add me on Facebook as Taylor Phillips. Like my Facebook page, Taylor Phillips' Detroit Sports page. Join my Facebook group, Taylor Phillips' Detroit Sports Group. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr at DT2Phillips. And connect with me on LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Google Plus as Taylor Phillips. Also email me at taylorgatorphillips14@yahoo.com and browse my Detroit sports blog at taylorsdetroitsports.com. The Detroit Sports Truth podcast is also available on iHeartRadio and SoundCloud. And welcome to episode 163 on the Detroit Sports Truth. I am, of course, yours truly, your host, Taylor Phillips. Tonight I'm going to talk about the Jets-Lions preseason opener at Ford Field, what I thought of it. I'm also going to check out the college football schedules for Michigan, Michigan State, Central Michigan, Western Michigan, and Eastern Michigan. I'm going to break down an article from Fansided on the Tigers manager Brad Ausmus and other options out there for the next manager. And finally, I'm going to look at the Red Wings and Pistons 2015-2016. And finally, I'm going to take a look at the Red Wings Pistons 2015-2016 regular season schedules. And I also have a Pistons update to wrap up the show. But first, it's time for 5 questions with Taylor the Gator Phillips. Joining me on tonight's 5 questions segment on the Detroit Sports Truth is Bryan Eimers. Where are you from, Bryan?
West Branch, Michigan.
All right. Question number 1, when did you begin to be a Detroit sports fan?
My very first, any sports team?
Yeah, for Detroit.
I was at my aunt's house in 2006 when Maglio Adonis hit that walk-off home run against the A's, and that's when I started watching.
How exciting was that?
Well, I was little. My family was going crazy, and I thought it was fun. So I got into baseball and stuff and started playing basketball. And
who's your favorite player of all time?
I hear my dad always talking about Barry Sanders for football, but as a kid, when I was a kid, I would have to say, all time for me would be, I'm going to have to go with Calvin Johnson. He's my all-time favorite so far. Megatron.
Question number 3. How would you describe the state of your favorite team right now?
Ooh, favorite team.
What is it now?
Any of the sports?
Yeah, out of all 4 Detroit pro sports teams. It can be college, too.
I would say regrouping, getting to the stage from rebuilding. Say rebuilding.
I assume that would be the Detroit Tigers.
Yep.
All right. Where do you think your team will end up at the end of the season?
As of right now, the Tigers, all they're doing is just playing baseball, just for the fun of it. So I'm just going to go with second place in the AL Central.
Okay. Finally, question number 5. If you could address your team, what would you say?
Just keep playing baseball. Just keep getting, try to get those wins. You got to, for the pitchers, you got to keep that ball low. You can't keep giving up the extra base hits for Sanchez. Simon has to keep the splitter low and just have fun.
So those are all the questions here. How happy are you, as a bonus question, with the Lions' 23-3 win over the Jets?
Oh man, that was great. Abdullah, I think he's going to be a great. He was a great draft pick in the second round. Stafford and Tate did their thing on the opening drive, so I was pretty happy from what I got to see. defense did great, even though it's against the Jets. I still think they'll do great in the regular season.
Yeah, I thought the Jets were falling apart, and the Lions' defense took advantage. They grounded the Jets to 3 points, and the Lions managed to score 23 on the Jets' defense.
Orlowski, he looks pretty good.
Yeah, he outperformed Kellen Moore. Well, Bryan, that's about it. Thanks so much for calling. Thanks for being a part of the show. I love having fans like you here.
And that was 5 questions with one of my fans, Bryan Eimers. Thanks for calling in, Bryan. Now to the Detroit Lions New York Jets preseason opener at Ford Field. Lions beat the Jets 23-3 at Ford Field in Detroit. Matthew Stafford to Golden Tate for 35 yards on the reception to open the scoring in the first quarter. The Jets would get on the board with a field goal. Ryan Fitzpatrick filled in for Geno Smith, who was punched in the face and would be out 6 to 10 weeks. And then Stafford was taken out of the game after just one possession. And Kellen Moore played the rest of the first half and only settled for 3 points. The Lions would score a field goal from Matt Prater. From 28 yards out with 5:30 left in the first quarter. That was after a botched snap. It came right to Kellen Moore, and he fumbled it. It came right to Kellen Moore, and he fumbled it. Like, he wasn't even paying attention. I mean, wake up.
Oh, man!
As for Amir Abdullah, the running back, he did his thing. He kept impressing the Lions players and the coaches and the fans as well. Even President Tom Luan was down there on the sideline watching the entire game as we saw him on television on our local Fox affiliates, Fox 2 in Detroit, Fox 32 in Cadillac. But anyway, the Lions would be stuck on their 10-3 lead at halftime as Kellen Moore threw an interception in the end zone to end the first half. And then when the third quarter got underway, Dan Orlovsky, on one play and one drive in 6 seconds, threw a 23-yard touchdown pass to Greg Salas to make it 17-3. And then with 7:04 left with 7:04 left in the third quarter. Kyle Brinza, a backup kicker, place kicker, hit a 49-yard field goal to make it 20-3 Lions. He would make it 23-3 in the fourth quarter with 8:27 remaining on a 41-yarder. I thought Dan Orlovsky outplayed Kellen Moore in the quarterback position at backup. And then Garrett Gilbert the fourth quarterback for the Lions did a good job running out the rest of the clock, running out the last 7 minutes of the game. And that was it. Lions beat the Jets 23-3. They are on the road next week. In Washington against the Redskins. That is next Thursday at 7:30 on Fox 2 WJBK in Detroit, and all of the Lions television network affiliates. You can also watch the preseason games on Fox 2's mobile app. Preseason week 3, however, will be in Jacksonville on CBS at 8 o'clock on August 28th. That's on a Friday. And then they wrap up their preseason at home against the Buffalo Bills on September 3rd on a Thursday at 7:30 on Fox 2. And then just 10 days from then, they begin the regular season at San Diego against the Chargers at 4:05 on Fox. Week 2, they're in Minnesota against the Vikings at 1 on Fox. Week 3, September 27th at 8:30 on NBC with Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth in the booth. The Lions have their first regular season game at home against the Denver Broncos. Peyton Manning at quarterback. And then the Lions are back on the road in Seattle in week 4 on Monday, October 5th at 8:30 on ESPN. Playing the Seahawks. Week 5 at home, obviously, at 4:05 on Fox, October 11th on Sunday, at Ford Field against the Arizona Cardinals. October 8th. Week 6, October 18th at 1 on Fox at Ford Field against the Chicago Bears. Week 7 on October 25th at 1 on Fox, they host the Vikes. Week 8, on November 1st at 9:30 a.m., they're in London on Fox taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Lions will be the road team, and the Chiefs will be the home team. And then on November 15th on Week 10, Week 9, they'll have a bye week. On Week 10 on November 15th. On Week 10 on November 15th at 1 on Fox, they're in Green Bay with a chance to end their drought at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers. They haven't beaten the Packers They haven't beaten the Packers at Lambeau Field since December 21st, 1991. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing. I think I'm right. Week 11, November 27th, November 22nd at 1 on CBS at Ford Field against the Oakland Raiders. Week 12 at 12:30 on Fox at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. On December 3rd at 8:25 on either CBS or the NFL Network at home against the Green Bay Packers. On December 13th, Week 14 at 1 on Fox at the St. Louis Rams. Week 15, December 21st at 8:30 on ESPN in New Orleans against the Saints. Week 16, December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, at 1 on Fox at home against the 49ers of San Francisco. And then Week 17, January 3rd, 2016, at 1 p.m. on Fox. They wrap up their regular season in Chicago against the Bears. So any early predictions? What is everybody's predictions? You can leave a comment here, or if you're still up, you can text message or call me at 231-429-3668. That is 231-429-3668. This is live and recorded for archive. Episode 163 of the Detroit Sports Truth. I'm Taylor Phillips. I'm going to go ahead and move on here. Check out the college football scores, if you don't mind. Starting with the Michigan Wolverines. They are at Utah against the Utes, Thursday, September 3rd. At 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. That'll be 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox Sports 1. Then on Saturday, September 12th, they're at home against the Oregon State Beavers at noon on ABC. Saturday, September 19th. Against the Nevada, Las Vegas Rebels at noon on BTN. Saturday, September 26th against the Brigham Young, the BYU Cougars. Time and telecast to be determined. Saturday, October 3rd, they're in Maryland, taking on the Terrapins at 8 p.m. on BTN. Then on Saturday, October 10th, on homecoming they face the Northwestern Wildcats at 3:30. On a network to be determined. Then on October 17th, they host the Michigan State Spartans. Time and network to be determined. Can't wait for the Mark D'Antonio, Jim Harbaugh era. Then they have a bye week. Then the Wolverines travel to Minnesota to take on the Golden Gophers at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central Time on either ABC, ESPN, or ESPN2. Then they got Rutgers at home, Indiana and Penn State on the road. And finally, the Ohio State Buckeyes, Jim Harbaugh versus Urban Meyer on the 28th. Networks to be determined for the last 4 games of the Michigan Wolverines football regular season. How do you think Michigan will do? Leave a comment or call me or text me at 231-429-3668. Moving on to the Michigan State Spartans. Speaking of which, on Friday, September 4th, Spartans are in Kalamazoo taking on the Western Michigan Broncos at 7. Saturday, September 12th, they're home against the Oregon Ducks in a rematch from last year. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Western Michigan game is on ESPNU. The Oregon game will be televised on ABC. Spartans take on Air Force on the 19th of September at noon on either ESPN or ESPN2. Then they take on the Chippewas of Central Michigan. My Chippewas, actually. Time and network to be determined. Then they play another home game on Homecoming on October 3rd against Purdue at noon on a network to be determined. And then on the 10th, on 10/10/15 at Rutgers at 8 on BTN. Then on the 17th, they visit the Wolverines. On the 24th, they host the Indiana Hoosiers. Then they have a bye week. Then they travel to Nebraska and take on the Cornhuskers at either 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern on either ABC, ESPN, or ESPN2. And they're home against Maryland on the 14th of November. They're at Ohio State on the 21st. And finally, they wrap up their regular season at home against the Penn State Nittany Lions on the 28th. Last 3 games, time and network to be determined. How do you think they'll do? Leave a comment or call me or text me at 231-429-3668. Now to my Chippewas. And speaking of Oklahoma State, oh wait, I mentioned Oregon State. Anyway, the Chippewas are home against the Oklahoma State Cowboys Thursday, September 3rd at 7 on ESPNU. Then on Saturday, September 12th, at Kelly Short Stadium, they take on the Monmouth Hawks on ESPN3 at 3 o'clock. Then they're at Syracuse on the 19th of September at 12:30 on the ACC RSN network. Then on the 26th, they're at Michigan State. As much as I love my Chippewas, I think the Spartans will beat them in East Lansing. I mean, I have to be true to my school, but I have to be truthful. It's the Detroit sports truth. You know what I mean? Then on October 3rd at 3 o'clock, they take on the Northern Illinois Huskies on television, a network to be determined. Then the Chips face the Broncos in Kalamazoo on the 10th of October. Time to be determined. Then they're home against Buffalo on the 17th. And then they visit Ball State and Akron on the 24th and 31st before having a bye week. And then they're back in action at home against the Toledo Rockets on November 10th at 8 o'clock on either ESPN2 or ESPNU. Then on the 18th, they're at Kent State at 8 on ESPN2 or ESPNU. And finally, they wrap up their season at home against the Eastern Michigan Eagles on November 27th on a Friday. Time to be determined there. Let's check out the Western Michigan Broncos schedule. Broncos are home against the Broncos host the Spartans at 7 on the 4th, as I mentioned before. Then the Broncos travel to Georgia Southern at 6 o'clock on ESPN3 on September 12th. Then they're back home against Murray State on the 19th at 7 on ESPN3. Then on the 26th, they travel to the Horseshoe and take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. No time determined yet. Then they host the Chippewas on October 10th after a bye week. Then on the 17th, they travel to Athens, Ohio, and take on the Ohio Bobcats. No time determined there. On the 24th, they're home against the Miami, Ohio Redhawks at 2 o'clock. Thursday, October 29th, at Eastern Michigan at 7:30 on the CBS Sports Network or ESPN3. Thursday, November 5th, at Ball State, at home against Ball State at 7:30 on the CBS Sports Network or ESPN3. Then on Wednesday, November 11th, at 8 o'clock against the Bowling Green Falcons at Waldo Stadium on ESPN2 or ESPNU. Then on Wednesday, November 18th, at Northern Illinois against the Huskies at 8 o'clock on ESPN2 or ESPNU. Then they wrap up their regular season in Toledo on November 27th on a Friday against the Rockets. Finally, the EMU Eagles, Eastern Michigan. EMU is hosting a movie event on the 24th. By the way, go to emueagles.com for the splash page. So the Eagles football team takes on Old Dominion at home on Saturday, September 5th at 3 p.m. on ESPN3 and WEMU, the Eagles radio network. Then on September 12th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Eastern, they're in Wyoming, taking on the Cowboys. The Wyoming Cowboys. Then they're back home on September 19th at 3 p.m. against the Ball State Cardinals. The Wyoming game is on Root Sports. The Ball State game is on ESPN3. Then on September 26th, they take on Army West Point. On October 3rd, they're at LSU, the Tigers. On October 10th at 3 p.m., they're home against the Akron Zips. On October 17th, they're at the Toledo Rockets. October 24th at the Northern Illinois Huskies. October 29th on a Thursday at home against Western Michigan. Saturday, November 7th at the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. The Western Michigan game is at 7:30. The Northern Illinois game is at 3:30. Then on November 14th, they're home against Massachusetts, the Minutemen. And finally, they go to Kelly Short Stadium and wrap up. And finally, they go to Kelly Short Stadium and wrap up their regular season at Central Michigan against the Chippewas on the 27th. So those are the college football schedules in the state of Michigan. The top 5 in the state. Any predictions, thoughts early on? 231-429-3668 is the number to call or text. Or leave a comment below on my podcast, episode 163 of the Detroit Sports Truth. I'm Taylor Phillips. Add me as a friend on Facebook, Taylor Phillips. Like my Facebook page, Taylor Phillips' Detroit Sports page. And join my group, Taylor Phillips' Detroit Sports Group on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Also find me on Google+, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Tumblr. My episodes are also available on iHeartRadio and SoundCloud. Search Detroit Sports Truth. Now I want to talk about the Tigers moving forward here. Steve Mitzel, a fan-sided headline, Detroit Tigers Brad Ausmus needs to get the reboot, meaning he needs to be fired. He wrote, quote, "The fight in the dugout last week was the straw that breaks Brad's back. The fight between Jose Iglesias and James McCann. Anthony Ghost stepped up to stand up to Jose Iglesias, who let a ground ball by when he could have made a diving play to get the out at first. Ausmus was given another year. But as far as the fight goes, he could not control it because he has no control of this team. Mitzel quoted, Ausmus shown that not only has Ausmus shown that he can't truly manage his team on the field, he has lost them off the field. And where Jim Leland managed with his heart and gut, Ausmus was supposed to manage with his head, unquote. Ausmus, quote, and I quote, certainly doesn't lead with his heart. And when he trusts his gut, it's like trusting a beer belly when you're trying to make a decision for that next beer, unquote. Kind of reminds me of Brad Ausmus being an arrogant, beer-drinking Southern hick. And earlier in the season, David Price exited the game and went to the dugout and stripped his uniform and began his post-game exercise ritual. Ausmus didn't even know where he was. Ausmus didn't even know where he was when the Ausmus didn't even know where Price was when the next inning started. How is that possible? Quote unquote. They branded this a miscommunication. Mitchell also quoted that Ausmus has also proven that he can't change the lineup when he needed to in the season when the Tigers fell off their great start and they needed a spark. He can't manage the bullpen. He can't manage his starting pitching. Always seemingly waiting one batter too long. He pinch hits or pinch runs at the strangest times. He has single-handedly put this team out of playoff contention with at least 10 losses this season that should be wins. Ausmus was also largely responsible for bad decisions in the Baltimore series last year that cost the Tigers an extended playoff run. Unquote. Yeah, he's awful. The Tigers, he's one of the primary reasons the Tigers need a reboot. Al Avila, the new Tigers GM, quote unquote, hasn't given Ausmus a vote of confidence this past season. He stated, quote, he's our manager for the rest of the season for sure. Operative words for the rest of the season. Code words, we have started the search process. He'll most likely be fired on October 5th, and the Tigers continue with the reboot. The next paragraph gives us a list of who the Tigers should hire. They got Ron Gardenhire, Manny Acta, Terry Francona, and even Gene LaManna is interviewed. And even Gene LaManna is interviewed several times for a manager role, and he would be considered. But I would go with Manny Acta. He's the mental sabermetrics guy and the fundamentals guy. Matt Derry of Detroit Sports 105.1 from noon to 3 every weekday thinks that Bryan Ausmus will be back next year because the ownership loves him.
Are you out of your mind?
Yeah, he's just sticking to his guns, even though he thinks he should be fired too. First of all, you say that Ausmus should be fired, and then you say Brad Ausmus will be back next year because the ownership loves him. I mean, come on. You're confusing us, Matt. Diesel. from what I just read, Steve Mitzel of Fansided, the Motor City Bengals, tells us that, quote, Ausmus most likely will be fired on October 5th, and the Tigers continue with the reboot. Couple more quotes here by Mitzel. The Tigers need to make the right coaching decision, much like Michigan made with Jim Harbaugh. And leaving Ausmus as the manager means the Tigers are not committed to winning in the near term. Rebooting him means that they are committed to winning. Rebooting him means that they are committed to winning in 2016. What he means by rebooting him is firing him, giving him the boot. So, I would prefer that Bryan Ausmus should be fired. So I'm going to go ahead and post that on Matt. I'm going to go ahead and post that on Matt Derry's timeline right now. Before I move on to the next topic, I would really appreciate for Matt Derry to start making up his mind about Brad Ausmus. I'm going to type in, this will help you make up your mind. There's the article. Now, a lot of people want Ron Gardenhire to manage the Tigers. Problem is, he's too old. He's got plenty of experience, but see, I got a comment reply from Chris Lockwood on the Lions video of Amir Abdullah running 46 yards. Says swearing in public is okay.
Are you out of your mind?
Ah, shut up, you idiot. What? Oh.
Well, anyway, since the Pistons have released their 2015-2016 NBA regular season, I'm going to go and look at that and the Red Wings season as well. So I'm going to go to DetroitRedWings.com first. The Red Wings preseason schedule. They're in Chicago on September 27th against the Blackhawks at United Center. They take on the Hawks at the Joe on Wednesday, September 23rd. They take on the Penguins and Bruins at home, and then they take on the Bruins and Penguins on the road. Then they have a home-and-home set at the Joe, and then Air Canada Center against the Maple Leafs, who have recently signed head coach Mike Babcock to an 8-year $50 million deal. The Red Wings have Jeff Blatchel and Tony Granado and Chris Chelios. My mom's favorite player, by the way. Want to give her a shout out. Now the regular season. They play the Maple Leafs again for the third time in a row, this time in a regular season game at home. On Friday, October 9th at 7:30. Of course, that'll be on Fox Sports Detroit. The FSD broadcast schedule for the Red Wings has not been determined yet, but they play the Hurricanes, Lightning, Hurricanes, Canadiens, Oilers, Flames, Canucks on the road. Hurricanes at home. Senators in a home-and-home set to wrap up October. November, Lightning, Leafs, Stars, Capitals, Sharks, Bruins, Senators, Capitals, Kings, Blues, Bruins, Oilers at home, Panthers at home. The Red Wings have got to beat the Panthers at home for the first time since God knows when. That's on November 29th. They begin December by taking on the Buffalo Sabres. Then they take on the Coyotes, Predators, Capitals, Canadiens, Devils, Sabres, Canucks, Flames, Devils, Predators, Wild, Jets, and Penguins on December 31st at home. Sidney Crosby again. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Then they ring in the new year 2016 against the Sabres on the road. Then they take on the Devils, Sharks, Ducks, Kings, Coyotes all on the road. Then they return home against the Flyers and Blues. They visit the Sabres, and they host the Ducks, and then they visit the Islanders to wrap up January. Before I believe what is the Olympic break or the All-Star break? Possibly the Olympic break. Then they're back in action on Wednesday, February 3rd in Tampa Bay against the Lightning. And then they're in Florida against the Panthers in Miami. Then they're back home for 5 games against the Islanders, Panthers, Senators, Avalanche, and Bruins. Then they're on the road for 4 against the Islanders, Penguins, Senators, and Rangers at the Garden. Then they're back home against the Blue Jackets, and they visit the Avs and Stars to wrap up February. Start March at home against the Blackhawks on March 2nd. Then they go to Chicago and play them there on March 6th at United Center. The March 2nd game against the Blackhawks is on NBCSN. On Wednesday night rivalry with Mike Emmerich and Eddie Olczyk and Pierre Maguire. Please, you have to trust them. Then they're in Columbus against the Blue Jackets. They host the Jets, Rangers, and Leafs. They visit the Flyers, Blue Jackets, Panthers, and Lightning. They host the Canadiens, Penguins, and Sabres, and they visit the Canadiens on March 29th. Then finally on April 1st. On April Fool's Day, they host the Wild. They visit the Leafs. They host the Flyers. They visit the Bruins and Rangers on April 9th. Bruins April 7th. Rangers April 9th at the Garden at 12:30 on FSD to wrap up their regular season. I have no early predictions myself just yet. But I'm going to go to the Pistons schedule now and skim them real quick. Pistons travel to Atlanta first off at 8 o'clock. They host the Jazz, Bulls, Pacers. They host the Jazz and Bulls to wrap up October. They host the Pacers to begin November. Then they go out west to take on the Suns, Trailblazers, Warriors, Kings, and Clippers and Lakers. They're back home against the Cavaliers on November 7th. They're back home against the They're back home against the Cleveland Cavaliers on November 17th. They visit the Timberwolves. They visit the Timberwolves. They host the Wizards. They take on the new logo look Milwaukee Bucks in Milwaukee. They host the Heat. Then they visit the Thunder and Nets, the Brooklyn Nets. Then they host the Houston Rockets, Suns, Bucks, Lakers. They visit the Charlotte Hornets. They take on the Memphis Grizzlies. 76ers on the road. Pacers, Clippers, and Celtics at home from December 12th through the 16th. Then they're on the road for 3 in Chicago, Miami, and Atlanta. They host Boston. They go to the Garden and take on the Knicks. Then they wrap up 2015 at home. Then they wrap up 2015 at home against the Timberwolves. By the way, the Timberwolves and former Piston Tayshaun Prince have agreed on a 1-year deal. It's been great, Tay. Might as well retire after the season's over. Then they ring in the new year in Indiana against the Pacers. They're back home against the Magic. Then they're in Boston. Then they host the Nets and Spurs. Then they head to Memphis. Then they're back home against Golden State and Chicago. They're in Houston, New Orleans, Denver, and Utah. And they're home against Philadelphia and Cleveland. And they wrap up. Then they wrap up January by beginning a 3-game road trip against the Raptors, ringing in starting February against the Nets in Brooklyn, and February 3rd against the Boston Celtics at the TD Bankworth Garden. They're back home against the Knicks on February 4th. At the Pacers on the 6th, they host the Raptors and Nuggets on 8th and the 10th. Then the All-Star break. Then they're back in action in Washington, D.C. against the Nets. Then they play the Pelicans, Cavaliers, the Cavaliers. They play against the Pelicans and Cavaliers, 76ers, Bucks, Raptors, Spurs, Knicks, Blazers, Mavericks, Hornets, 76ers, Wizards, Hawks, Kings, Nets, Bucks, Magic, Hornets, Hawks, Thunder, Mavericks, Bulls, Heat, Magic, Wizards, Heat, and Cavaliers on April 13th on my birthday. So go to DetroitRedWings.com and Pistons.com for their regular season schedules. I can't find the preseason schedule yet. I'm going to try to search preseason here. Nothing. So, that's going to do it for episode 163 of the Detroit Sports Truth. I'm Taylor Phillips. If there's anything that you want more of or less of on my show, please let me know. I'm going to sign off now. See you on episode 164.